Good day, and thank you so much, KCDF, and all the partners taking part in this World Café. My name is Bhekinkosi Moyo. I'm a professor of philanthropic studies at the West Business School and the director of the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment. CAPSI is located in Johannesburg, but is a Pan-African initiative which was established to study the various forms and expressions of philanthropy across the continent, including social investment. It was established also because we wanted to make sure that we close the bridge between practice, theory, and research. But equally important, we wanted to reposition the narrative on African philanthropy and African development. As you would be aware, for a long period of time, African philanthropy had been relegated to the margins when compared to other forms of philanthropy across the world. We wanted to correct this, and the only way we could correct it is to establish a program that would develop and create a new cohort of researchers and academics in the field of African philanthropy. Secondly, we wanted to produce as much knowledge as we could by establishing research projects across the continent. As we speak today, we have studied the different expressions of philanthropy across 33 countries in Africa. We are continuing with this form of research because to us it is important that we get to interpret the landscape of philanthropy and understand the role that philanthropy is playing in the various communities, whether it's communities that relate to research, to knowledge generation, to practice, to development, to policy making, or to sustainability, or responding to the new frontiers that seem to be confronting the continent, such as climate change, the rise of wars, but also issues that have to deal with the persistent challenges of inequality, poverty, and social exclusion, among others. So we see philanthropy playing a huge role in addressing most of these issues. And so as CAPSI, our role and mandate is to produce this knowledge, package it in ways that makes it easier for anyone to access it, utilize it, but also channel it towards the resolution of Africa's problems. But we are also clear that in the next few years, we would want to be a center of excellence, a center that produces the caliber of individuals who would go out and produce more knowledge, lead institutions with efficiency and effectiveness, but also be at the center of resolving some of the vexing challenges that are facing the continent. So I'm really happy to be in this forum to talk about the role that philanthropy plays in various ways, but also in the broader issues of development. Based on research that we have done across the continent, there are a few trends that I want to speak about. Obviously, given the time constraints, we are not able to speak about all of them, but I will focus myself on the issue of local giving and community philanthropy. I think there's no better way to express the role that local giving plays in our various communities than to look at what just happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We already knew this, but I think what COVID did was to really sharpen our understanding of the role that community philanthropy plays. Wherever there's a disaster, a humanitarian crisis for that matter, it is the locals who are the first to respond and find ways and solutions to deal with the situation at hand. We saw this in West Africa when the Ebola pandemic hit the countries there. We also saw it recently with the cyclones in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And we saw it sharply with the COVID-19 pandemic, where different communities, the business sector, governments all came together to find ways in which they could respond and solve the crisis. For the first time, we are told by research that high net worth individuals in Africa gave more than they had done in the past decade, between March 2020 and December 2020. So this is an indication that local giving can actually be deployed towards resolving pandemics and any other humanitarian crisis that can emerge at any given point in time. We also know that the population of high net worth individuals is increasing in the continent, and therefore the opportunities and the possibilities of resolving Africa's problems lie within our reach. But it's not just high net worth individuals that respond to day-to-day challenges or to the bigger issues that are facing the continent. Individuals respond at any given point in time. We just completed research in Malawi, in Mali, in Rwanda, and in Sierra Leone, where we're looking at community philanthropy and how it is utilized by different communities. The study in Sierra Leone found that almost everyone that was consulted said giving is within their DNA. It is part and parcel of who they are as the people of Sierra Leone. I'm sure that everyone who comes from the African continent will actually justify and confirm that giving is something that happens almost every day, every minute in the life of an African. So giving plays a role in creating social cohesion, but it also plays a role in the transformation of our African economies, including the resolution of some of the vexing issues that could be cultural, political, but also increasingly using indigenous knowledge systems to address issues that might be related to climate change. In Malawi, research tells us that when the cyclone hit, it was Malawi that recorded fewer deaths compared to Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And the reason why that happened is because Malawians used their knowledge, their indigenous knowledge systems, to actually warn and ask everyone to go to higher ground. But they could do that because of the solidarity and the communal spirit that existed among them. The other thing that we are seeing with community philanthropy is the rise of infrastructure organizations that utilize resources from the communities, but are also driven and championed by people from those communities. Whether this is in the form of community foundations or in the form of community-like structures, the reality of the matter is that these institutions are looking inwards and utilizing the assets that exist in communities to respond to issues that affect them. And they go out only to look for those resources that could complement what they already have. What this tells us is that solutions to Africa's problems actually lie within the very same problems that we are seeking to solve. And this, in many ways, is a debate that we should be having around decolonizing philanthropy, because we cannot decolonize philanthropy if we are not addressing the role that community philanthropy plays in our region. So without really going into much detail, the point of the matter is that research is telling us that community philanthropy is at play at different countries to resolve different expressions of the challenges that they might be facing. And the next step really is to explore the extent to which community philanthropy is linked to other forms of philanthropies. Some writers have spoken about community philanthropy as horizontal philanthropy and other forms of institutional philanthropy such as foundations and others as vertical forms of philanthropy. I suspect that our next point of debate really is to what extent are the two linked, aligned, but also complementing each other when it comes to the African continent. We know that philanthropy has been centered in policy making, especially with the development of the Sustainable Development Goals and their adoption in 2015, 2016, thereabout. Philanthropy played a huge role, and we saw this in the conference that took place in Addis Ababa, the Conference on Financing for Development, moving on to the United Nations General Assembly, where philanthropy had a role to play. And out of that, we know that different countries have established at a local level philanthropy, sustainable development goals platforms, which are a triangle to explore how business, philanthropy, and civil society could come together to champion the resources and deploy them in ways that address our issues. So in policy making, there's a role that community philanthropy is playing because it understands the context, it understands the culture, it also understands the nuances. But there's also a role that philanthropy also plays globally in terms of responding in a very effective, risk-taking way to issues that are becoming the frontiers of the challenge that we need to be responding to. Climate change is one big area that in the next few years philanthropy will be challenged to focus on. And so I think in terms of understanding philanthropy in the continent, in terms of understanding resource mobilization and investment, we also have to identify some of the countries that are key in terms of thinking about strategies to mobilize resources domestically and channel them towards development. The growth of high net worth individuals, as I said, is an area that we need to pay attention to. And currently, the concentration of high net worth individuals is in countries such as South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, to some extent Ghana, and other countries that have a sizable number of high net worth individuals. And within those countries, there are specific cities where there's a high concentration of these high net worth individuals and wealth. And that wealth could be deployed towards solving community issues, but also solving national as well as Pan-African issues. One of the things that happened during COVID-19 was for high net worth individuals looking inwards and stopping their Pan-African appeal and Pan-African approach to solving domestic issues. That was something that we raised as a problem because solving local problems only does not help in the long run because communities are interwoven, they are interconnected. And through globalization, we know that we cannot localize a problem. And therefore, going forward, philanthropy ought to be thinking about how to resolve problems holistically. And that could mean supporting causes across countries and across regions. So I think, that's one area to highlight, that high net worth individuals are concentrated in some countries, and those countries need to understand that to resolve the continental problems, their high net worth individuals might have to support issues across the continent. The second is that these high net worth individuals are responding to issues in the continent the best way they can. In my view, they still need to be supported to give effectively. And I think this is why it is important to support some initiatives such as the African Philanthropy Network, the African Philanthropy Forum, the East Africa Philanthropy Network, among others, as platforms to support but also to encourage giving locally, whether by high net worth individuals, by foundations, or any individual for that matter in the continent. And so I think that we should encourage the growth of philanthropy, not just in these countries where there's already a vibrant sector, but also in countries where none seems to be happening, because philanthropy exists in every country, in every community. It only requires us to promote it, but also to showcase the impact that giving has. And so how can philanthropy be expressed, or what are the popular ways of giving across the continent? We know that it's easy for individuals to give in kind, and that will continue for years to come. Individuals give in kind, they give of their time, they give of their networks, they also give in goods. Right? So during the COVID pandemic, one of the things that happened as a result of the poor performances by different economies was the resort, especially by the private sector and others, to giving in kind, giving goods, especially in the sector of education. We saw so many corporates giving computers, giving data, and so forth and so on. And so that's another way in which giving is actually taking place across the continent. in addition to financial giving, either through sponsorships, through grants, or individuals giving to an individual, or giving to a group, or giving to an institution. And the African Philanthropy Network, in the previous time when it was called the African Grantmakers Network, conducted a study that showed the different ways in which giving happens in the continent, and it framed it as one to one, one to many, many to one, and many to many, among others. But we're seeing also new ways of giving, especially emerging as a result of technology. So one of the things that is likely to occupy us going forward, especially in the continent, given our artifacts, our art, and different institutions that carry our memory as a continent, is the rise of NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, the cryptocurrencies, as well as blockchain, as methods and platforms through which giving could express itself. And this is following up on the heels of technology-based platforms that have been utilized to raise funding, especially for campaign purposes. And finally, I think that in the private sector, we are encouraging the private sector to give beyond the usual corporate social responsibility, to adopting new ways of giving, such as shares. How do private sector companies work with the non-profit sector by giving them shares so that they are able to be part of decision making, but also continually reap the dividends that could be resulting from those shares. So these are some of the ways in which giving could actually take place. Some of them are popular, some of them are emerging. But in my view, I think that philanthropy is in a better space now. It is poised to actually respond to the vexing issues that are challenging us. And if there is any demonstration that philanthropy is central and should be centered in development and in policy making, it is the COVID-19 pandemic that ushered all of us into new ways of thinking. These are my thoughts. I'm very sad that I could not make it in person, but I'm hoping that everyone is going to have a very insightful discussion on this day, where different groups are coming together to think about these issues that affect us. Thank you very much, KCTF and team. Wishing everyone the best in this conversation.